given that, there we go. And then also, given that Mr. De Los Santos and Senator Miranda did this last night, I will defer to my seatmate so that he can sort of replicate some of the facilitation that took place last night. All right, so we are in the middle of April, and over the last 3 or 4 weeks, what's happened is both the Senate President, President Peterson, and the Speaker of the House, both of them Republicans, have been meeting with the governor's office to create a budget for all of us to support. That's important to note because Governor Hobbs is implementing a lot of the ideas, a lot of our priorities, a lot of our values into that budget. In addition to that, our Democratic caucus has engaged in conversations with all of our members. So we have had a conversation with all of our members so that we know what those issues are to our caucus. And those conversations have been shared with the governor. The Democratic caucus meets once a week with Governor Hobbs's team, and they are really receptive to the information. And so it becomes a listening tour. I will tell you that there are 3 things that sort of stand out in terms of what we Democrats have been advocating for and asking for. And I would imagine that tonight's conversation sort of will go deeper into these ideas. But the one thing that we have been discussing as a caucus is the need for housing, and that includes affordable housing, rental assistance, but we are really cognizant of what's taking place in our community. And we want to make sure that the Democratic caucus, along with our governor, delivers. So housing has been of top priority. Additionally, we are also focused on education, particularly in restoring the funding after the inflation, and then making sure that all of our teachers feel supported and that all of our educators, including social workers, counselors, and instructional coaches and aides, are supported. And then finally, and I think something that will give our entire district a lot of pride, is healthcare and making sure that individuals are protected and that they have access to those resources. You'll all be very happy to know that our very own representative, Mr. De Los Santos, has dropped a number of bills to allocate certain funds for those dollars. So again, as a caucus, the top 3 priorities that we are going with so far are housing, education, and then healthcare. And I'll hand it off to Mr. De Los Santos, and then we would both love to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Quiñonez. Thank you, Patrick Brown, for setting this up. And thank you all for joining us tonight. This is extremely exciting and incredibly important, this conversation we're having. Frankly speaking, the budget is the most important thing that this legislature does. And Representative Quiñonez did a terrific job of sort of giving a lay of the land of the negotiations and the talks that have occurred thus far. I want to take us a step back just a little bit and talk about the Arizona budget as a whole, so we all have a little bit of context and education as to what we're talking about. So the Arizona budget is, roughly speaking, this fluctuates year to year, but about $16 billion of what we call the general fund. It is about $16 billion. About $15 billion of those dollars are already accounted for. That is spending that we need to do constitutionally and statutorily. The law says this money is already accounted for. This is sort of basic things that keep the lights on, keep governments running, the trains running on track and on time, proverbially. So think baseline funding for the Department of Public Safety, baseline funding for the Department of Education, baseline funding for all the sorts of things that government does. When we talk about budget negotiations here, what we're really zeroing in on is that roughly $1 billion that's left over. That is what we're talking about. So in these budget negotiations, just to back up, it's about $16 billion budget. 15 billion of those dollars is already accounted for. The $1 billion that we're talking about, that's where the budget negotiations are occurring. I also want to say that we're going to be talking today about how to spend that money. And one thing you will very, very quickly come to realize is that we do not have enough money to invest in our communities. We simply do not have, we could very easily spend that $1 billion in education or in healthcare or in housing. The fact is that $1 billion is not enough to invest and fully fund our community priorities. And the reason for that is that because the Republican legislature and the Republican governor of years past have year after year after year cut corporate taxes and cut taxes for the wealthy. And every dollar that we give to the corporations and every dollar that we give to the wealthy is a dollar that is taken out of our public education system, is a dollar that is taken away from teacher salaries, is a dollar that is taken away from our healthcare system. And so one of the things that I just want to be very frank with, because I don't like giving false illusions, is that we're going to have to make very difficult choices, and not every single one of our priorities will be funded. And I don't say that to be pessimistic. I say that to be honest. I say that to be real with you. And I say that to build the urgency for, frankly, raising taxes on corporations and the ultra wealthy, because they need to be paying their fair share so that all of our collective community priorities can actually be funded. So that is just where I want to start the conversation. And I'm really excited to hear, what folks think our priorities should be, and where you think your dollars, our shared dollars, should be going. I will say that I do echo Representative Quiñonez that my top 3 priorities remain in education and housing and in healthcare. That is what the voters, that is what the constituents, all of you, sort of sent me to fund. I spoke to, frankly, thousands of voters while on the campaign trail. I heard you loud, I heard you clear: invest in our schools, make housing affordable, and healthcare is a human right. And that's exactly what we're fighting to do. And so we're very excited to hear from all of you. And the floor is open for questions.
Carmen.
Good evening. I'm Carmen Terrell, and I would like to first of all thank everyone that's on this call for being on here. And I spoke to Mr. De Los Santos earlier today, but this is the first time I'm seeing you, Mr. Quiñonez. And going back to what I was saying last night, and I mean, just to give you a background real quick on me, I don't live in Laveen. I actually live in LD 26, but Laveen means a lot to me. It really does. And I feel like Laveen is just in desperate need of help, to keep these people at bay, because I get so tired of these corporate takeovers and these city sweeps where, they sweep people around. And like when people feel that they got some kind of ground where they can be stable, and then they start putting the effort into improving the community, and it takes off and it does really well, then here come these corporate vultures want to take over. And it's like, no, this has got to stop. This has got to stop now. And so like, I just think that, and plus I've seen the history and kind of know the history in a little bit of sense. And I'm just like, no, this has got to stop. And it's beautiful down there. And I just think that, a little improvement needs to be made, but not too much. Like, for example, stores like Sprouts and AJ's need to be there, as well as, Laveen's always been farmland. So just keep the community garden farm areas at, keep them maintained or bring them back. So that way everybody there can have healthy food, because I notice in them areas you see all these fast food restaurants, and it's just, oh my God, it's and then like the infrastructure stuff, because I was just getting off of the city council budget meeting, one of them. And I was talking about infrastructure too, because in some of those areas down there, there's not even a little a bench or a hub space that people can sit at, you know, to wait for a bus, if a bus even comes down there.
Right.
And to know that there's these carpet vultures again that want to make Levine into a Scottsdale. It's like, first of all, you don't have enough water for all of that.
Right.
So
right.
how are you going to manage in the first place doing that? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm made to understand too that there's not a hospital down there, right?
Correct. So, Ms. Carmen, thank you for being from LD 26 and taking part in the democratic process and being here and joining us. Mr. De Los Santos and I live fairly close to each other, and we neighbor or are in Levine. So we are fully aware of the needs that Levine particularly needs. I will say a couple of things just in response of what I heard, and then sort of how we can advance some of those things, particularly when you mention healthy foods. One of the things that we have been discussing already as a caucus is something called Double Up Food Box. And this is particularly for individuals who are low income, who take advantage of SNAP and EBT, for there to be a $1 so that they can spend those dollars on fruits and vegetables and other healthy items. So that's one way that that we are addressing that. But hearing the community talk about that obviously gives us leverage when we go into these conversations, because then we're hearing it directly from the community.
I think that's a terrific point. Food insecurity and healthy foods is something that is very close to my heart. Before running for office, I was the head of public policy for the Association of Arizona Food Banks. So I worked very, very hard, frankly, on ensuring that every single Arizonan, one, doesn't go hungry, and the wealthiest society in human history, which is not only terrible public policy, but morally despicable, but also to make sure that everybody has healthy food. And so I've been proud to co-sponsor legislation to ensure that our schools are providing free breakfast and lunches for children. I'm an advocate and have been an advocate for years for the Double Up Food Bucks program. But also you mentioned infrastructure and transportation. And one of the things that's on the table right now is Proposition 400. And without getting too much into the weeds, Proposition 400 is basically what funds our roads and our public transportation system in Maricopa County. And it does so by levying a half-cent sales tax, basically. That proposition is about to expire. And if it expires, and if we don't renew it, it would be a massive and devastating blow to our roads, to our bridges, and most of all to our public transportation system. And the truth is that in the current negotiations, Republicans are trying to keep the funding for the roads, but devastate the funding for public transportation. I oppose that, and I oppose that strongly. In my view, public transportation is public and it needs to be fully funded. And I would like to see us transition to a public transportation system that runs 100% on clean, green energy and that is free at the point of use. That is how most other major economically developed countries in the West do it. And there's absolutely no reason why the wealthiest nation on the planet shouldn't have that either. We deserve robust world-class infrastructure, and we're not getting it. So, Carmen, I continue to fight for big investments in our public infrastructure system. And thank you for the question. I know, Carmen, we've had a lot of conversations over the past couple of weeks, and I look forward to them more. And Mr. Quiñonez, it looks like there's questions in the chat as well as people with their hands raised.
So there's questions in the chat. What I'll do is I will briefly but directly answer Nick Brown's questions. And then we'll go to Erica and then Enrique. So the first question that Nick asks is, what does investment in affordable housing look like under the proposed state budget? So Arizona has something called the Arizona Housing Trust Fund. And what the Arizona Housing Trust Fund does is essentially serves as a department that allocates different dollars, and these dollars go to rental assistance. These dollars go to construction of affordable housing, and these dollars go towards, in some cases, to helping first-time home buyers transition from renting to housing. So historically, what happens is the state will invest in the Arizona Housing Trust Fund. The Arizona Housing Trust Fund then works with non-for-profits and other organizations to allocate grants depending on what the non-for-profit is trying to fund. That's typically how it works. Last year, the Housing Trust Fund received $60 million. Governor Hobbs, in her executive budget that was released in January, was asking for at least $150 million for this cycle, for this go-round. We are sticking to that, and because we know that housing needs those kinds of resources. So that's how it works. The second question goes to what Mr. Los Santos already addressed, which is what are the plans to expand public transportation options in South Phoenix under the budget? I know light rail expansion is underway to baseline and set aside. So the only thing that I will add to Prop 400 is that it will expire in 2025. So we've got a year to renew this 1 cent sales tax on Maricopa. And this applies only to Maricopa. So it doesn't apply to any of the other 14 counties. This is specifically for Maricopa. The majority party is trying to strip any new funding for light rail expansion. They are okay with doing what's called maintenance and operations. But again, the thing to remember here is that what they want to do through Prop 400 is simply build roads. Democrats have said we need to include light rail. The thing with light rail, and thank you for sharing that that link. The thing with transportation and in particular with Prop 400 is it's a sales tax levied on Maricopa, and then cities do what's called a matching fund. So with federal dollars, and then the city invests their own dollars. That's typically how transportation projects get expanded. The other way that they get expanded is if a bill passes through the entire process, where certain dollars are allocated to the expansion of I-10, I-17, any of the freeways, and then those dollars do get divested from the budget into constructing those roads.
Absolutely. No apologies necessary.
No,
Nick.
none.
That's an
This is
incredibly important question. Thank you for both. I will also say that aside from the Housing Trust Fund, there are a little other sort of proposals on the table as part of the budget that would make housing more affordable. One of them is what is called LIHTC, which is something that stands for the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. What this basically does is it's an incentive for developers to build affordable housing. For a whole host of reasons, building housing is incredibly expensive for developers, and that's why housing is so expensive for consumers, because the developers are trying to make money on it, so they're going to have to sell the house more than what they built it on, obviously. And if you're building affordable housing, well, you're not really making money on it, right? So there's no incentive for the developer to build something that they're going to lose profit on. So what the low-income housing tax credit does is it basically tells the developer, no, still, you need to build the housing, the affordable housing, and sure, you'll sell it at a loss, but the state is going to come in and basically pay you what you would have made otherwise. And it's a sort of very complicated system. But for every dollar that Arizona invests in LIHTC, we get a lot more federal funding that comes down and that helps build more affordable housing. So it's one tool that we have to incentivize more affordable homes. And the nice thing is that a lot of the homes that are built using LIHTC need to be using federal energy efficiency standards. And so they're sort of state of the art and when it comes to climate and the environment. But in addition to the Housing Trust Fund, the $150 million, which, by the way, would be the largest ever investment in housing in the state of Arizona's history, we do have other tools and other options on the table.
And Mr. Los Santos, right before we go to Erica and Enrique, if I could just add as a point of personal privilege, last Monday, I passed what's called a striker. So it's a last minute bill. And this striker was specifically on LIHTC, so the low income housing tax credit. The current LIHTC is scheduled to expire in 25. So we're gonna have a big year in 25. And the current striker that has gone through appropriations, it still has not been brought forth to a vote, but the current bill would extend it to 28. So just as Mr. De Los Santos mentioned, so that we could at least take advantage of those federal dollars with Arizona investing in affordable homes. So it's a match. And then the last thing about that is think of LIHTC as us telling the state what to invest money in. So it's not just like a free money giveaway. It's Arizona saying we choose to spend dollars on affordable housing. We're working with developers to construct those affordable housing units. Erica? Hi, baby. Looks like you're on mute. But I see the baby asking a lot of budget questions.
Okay, Erica, what we'll do while you're working on your mic, we'll come back around to you. So Enrique, go ahead.
Hello. Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So on education, there's two pieces of the negotiation. One of them has to do with the Arizona Promise Scholarship Fund, with adding between 40 to 80 million dollars and allowing Dreamers or DACA students to apply. Versus school vouchers, which I believe this year went up to $317 million. I just want to know, like, your intake on the negotiations on these two issues, and where does the caucus stand on these?
I'll start us off, Mr. De Los Santos, and then I would, So yes, the governor's executive budget did allocate $80 million for Promise scholarships. Promise scholarships help students who qualify for FAFSA, and then the state essentially supports their going to college through Promise scholarships. Last year there was $20 million. The governor has doubled that to 40 here for all students, and then she's added another 40 to support Prop 308 recipients. So this would be our DACA. This would be students who are undocumented but have lived in Arizona for at least 2 years and call Arizona home. What the Board of Regents has asked us to do is to simply combine the 40 and the 40 and include it as one into the budget, because then the universities would be able to allocate those dollars on their own, as opposed to the technicalities of right now. Prop 308 students are not able to fill out their FAFSA, and so then that creates sort of like a technical inconsistency where you wouldn't know which students would qualify for that. So all of the schools have said it's best if you put the $40 million together so that it becomes 80, and then the universities would create their own mechanism to identify how to award those dollars to our Prop 308 students. Mr. De Los Santos, did you want to talk about the ESAs?
Absolutely. But before we get to the ESAs, just one quick point on the Promise scholarships. I believe that every student in the state of Arizona, regardless of the color of their skin, of their zip code, of their gender identity, of their sexual orientation, or frankly, of their immigration status, needs to have the opportunity to pursue their dreams and pursue and succeed, right? Whether that's a trade school or a community college or a four-year university, students are our future. They're the future of our economy and of our society. And so that's why I introduced House Bill 2749, which would provide 100% tuition-free public university, community colleges, and trade schools, including for undocumented students. You will not be surprised to learn that the Republican Party refused to give my bill a hearing. That is unsurprising. But we are building, I think, toward that goal. And I think the governor's investment of the additional $80 million into the Promise Scholarship is important. I fully support that investment into our public universities. So I hope we can get that. I'm optimistic. The second point about the ESAs, I want to back up for just a second. What are ESAs? They stand for Empowerment Scholarship Accounts. You'll also know them as vouchers. Basically, this is a way that the Republicans are trying to defund our public education system and take our public education dollars and hand them over to private schools. And this is a disaster for a lot of reasons. It's a disaster because it defunds our public schools. And it's also a disaster because it gives money that needs to go to the districts that need the most support, to the Levine School District, to the Roosevelt School District, pulls money out of their pockets and hands them over to wealthy families who decide to send their kids to a big private school. Now, if you are wealthy and you want to send your kid to a private school, do that. But you will not use public dollars to do it. Over my dead body, are you taking money away from the Roosevelt School District to give to some really rich private school? Okay, that is simply absurd. Arizona is the only state in the nation that does this, and it is obliterating, frankly, our public education system. The Republican governor and the Republican majority passed last year a bill that says, yeah, anybody, basically any child can get one of these vouchers and take money away from the public school and go give it to a private school, which, by the way, could be a religious school. It could be a school that teaches discrimination. It could even be homeschooling, and they have no accountability. And one of the problems is that we're seeing stories where people are like, well, I'm going to take my kid out of the public school, take the voucher, homeschool them, and then they ended up spending the money on like very fancy gym equipment because they want to teach their kid PE, or they buy really expensive kitchen equipment because they want to teach a cooking class.
Mhm.
And the other thing that happens is that these vouchers come with no accountability. So we could be spending our money to send children to private schools where the teachers don't have to be fingerprinted, don't need a teaching credential, and the children don't have to be tested. Public money should stay in public schools. And unfortunately, a lot of wealthy parents are aware of this program, and more than we thought, more than we anticipated, have signed up to take advantage to that program. And it is draining hundreds of millions of dollars from our public school system. Something like $300 million of our public school money is being taken away and being siphoned to the private schools. Governor Hobbs's budget says no more to that. Governor Hobbs's budget proposes an end to vouchers and ESAs. And I believe that most Democrats, certainly I do, and I believe Mr. Quiñonez as well, supports the governor in this proposal. The problem is that we need at least some Republicans to come on board. I don't know if that's going to happen this year. The Republicans are gung-ho about this. But we really seriously need to stop funding that voucher system and reinvest that money back into our public schools.
Yeah. Erica, we'll go to you in a second. If I could just add a couple of things to what Mr. De Los Santos mentioned. Yes, everything. And this is something that we can't typically do while we're at the Capitol, but we can do it here on this Zoom call. If you're as infuriated by the information that was just shared, please take this as an opportunity to talk to family and friends about why it's important to support Democrats up and down the ballot. Because the majority, the Republicans, are the ones who passed this last year. And to answer the question directly, and again, just being fully transparent, the Republicans are not budging on this as we speak. I want to make that very clear. They are not budging on ESAs, and they fail to recognize the numbers. It's going to cost over the next 10 years, 1.5 billion with a B, $1.5 billion from our public schools into individuals who can afford to send their kids to private schools. And we know that because Mr. De Los Santos referenced the data. Get this, out of all of the ESAs that were taking advantage since the universal expansion, only 25% of those students were previously going to a public school. So that means that 75% of the ESAs that have been taken advantage of are being taken advantage by parents and students who were not previously going to public schools. That needs to be remedied, because if not, it's going to have severe consequences on our state. Erica, we believe your mic is up.
Yes, hi. Buenas tardes. Sorry about that. Hola. My name is Erica Mock. I live off 38th Street in Baseline, so I am a constituent. Thank you for having this conversation. I tuned in, one, to learn about the budget and kind of what you all are working on. But I also work for the Women's Foundation for the state of Arizona. I believe you know my boss, Angela Flores. But something we're working on right now tied to education is we have a Pathways for Single Moms program that allows, it's funded through ARPA dollars. And the program, the funding we got is for 200 single moms to go through the program across the state. Here in Phoenix, we're working with Dress for Success, as well as the YWCA in Tucson and Coconino Community College up north. Obviously, it's limited funding, so we're trying to work with the governor's office to get it into the budget. We're asking for $3 million per year to at least put 75 moms through the program each year, on top of the 200 already that we have. So I wanted to just chat with you all about it and see if there's any possibilities to get your support. I'm happy to schedule a meeting to talk more in depth about it. But that was just a plug I wanted to make during this meeting.
Erica, Mr. Dos Santos, go ahead.
Oh, no. Erica, thank you so much. That is exactly the kind of thing we want to hear in this, in these town halls. I appreciate the work that you do, that your organization does. That is a fantastic recommendation. I've just dropped a link for everybody into the chat to learn more about this program. Definitely, I would love to schedule a meeting with you to learn even more and to see how we can support that that proposal.
Yes.
Thank you.
And absolutely. And just to echo what my seatmate said, Erica, that's perfect. That's exactly what we need to hear, because obviously we've got our buckets and we do our best in engaging with as many community members as possible, but we don't get to engage with every member. And so platforms like tonight provide us with an opportunity to directly hear from our constituents to know, oh, you know, if this is a program that's important to one of our constituents and they work with an organization that already gets funding, then these are conversations that we can take into the budget negotiations. So absolutely, I look forward to hosting you and engaging with you at the Capitol. You'll get a 2-for-1, so that way you don't have to repeat. That way you don't have to repeat yourself.
Thank you. I'll make sure and reach out to both your offices. And my daughter was raising her hand in agreement, so we appreciate it.
Good. I know we've got a few questions in the chat and we will get to those. Do we have any other individuals that would like to, one, ask a question out loud, or perhaps tell us about something that they're aware of, that they're familiar with from within the state government and how that could work? While we get some more information, one of the questions that was asked had to do with how are we going to support our students, particularly mental health, juveniles, youth, mental health, youth, juveniles, and our community. The governor's executive budget has allocated about $50 million to increase employee salaries in Access, Department of Health, the Department of Justice, Veterans, Nursing, caseworkers, and then private prisons and courts probation. So that's a big bucket that goes directly into supporting some of those things that were asked by Lisa White.
Yeah, there's also looks like a second part to that question by Lisa having to do with water. So Lisa
yes.
asks about the Saudi water deal that is threatening our future water supply. So just to take a quick second, in case folks are not too familiar with what the Saudi water deal is, very, very long story and complicated story, short and simple, is you have a Saudi company that is coming to Arizona, buying up a bunch of land. The reason they're not really buying the land, they're leasing the land from the state of Arizona. The reason they're leasing the land from the state of Arizona is not necessarily because they want the land, it's because they want the water that is under the land. As you may know, Saudi Arabia is located in a desert, which is a place that is somehow even drier than Arizona. And because Arizona, for decades, the Republican Party has neglected its duty to protect our water supply, we have extremely weak water laws in many ways. Very, very weak water laws that allow corporations to come in and exploit those laws, take our water, and ship it elsewhere. And that is exactly what happened in this scenario. A Saudi company came in, leased the land from the government, took our water, and shipped it to Saudi Arabia. Is effectively what happened. Our Attorney General, Democratic Attorney General Chris Mays, has launched an investigation into whether or not there was any illegal activity as part of this deal. As we await the results of that investigation, what I believe we need to do, and Representative Quiñonez last session served as a member of the Natural Resources, Energy, and Water Committee. This session, I have succeeded and stepped into those shoes on the Natural Resources, Energy, and Water Committee. And what I have learned is that our water laws must be strengthened, because frankly, it is not just Saudi Arabia that is doing this. I urge you, and I'll drop a couple links into the chat. You have Wall Street firms. We'll be very plain about it. They are Wall Street investment firms that are coming to Arizona and buying hundreds and thousands of acres of land. Again, what they do not care about the actual land. What they want is the water. They want the rights to the water that is under the land. Their plan is that they're going to sit on that water. They're going to hold that water hostage, and they're going to wait for our water crisis to get worse and worse and worse. And once we're at a point where we're so desperate, they're going to price gouge the water, and they're going to sell us the water at extraordinarily high rates. That should be illegal. So I am currently working on legislation that would prohibit that practice. I look forward to unveiling that legislation next session. So that's sort of the update on the Saudi water deal. We do have related to the water issue. Last year, the legislature appropriated $1 billion to something called WIFA, the Water Infrastructure Financing Authority. Basically, a new government body that is responsible for bringing more water into the state of Arizona and conserving more water in the state of Arizona. It's the biggest investment the state has ever done into water, and the money, the $1 billion, is coming in a 3-year installment. So last year, the WIFA got $333 billion. This year, they'll get another $333 billion. to bring more water in Arizona and to conserve more water in Arizona. So some of the things that money potentially is going to is like providing small farmers with new technology so that they use less water when they irrigate, right? And they irrigate more efficiently. We have other ideas Democrats do about innovative ways on how to save water. One of the most favorite ideas I've heard so far, kind of nerdy and a big word, called agrovoltaics, which is basically a practice where Arizona's gotten so hot because of climate change that the water is evaporating quickly. So farmers need to use more water to grow the same amount of crops. And the solution is, have you ever been to a parking lot and it's like a covered parking lot because there's shade, except the shade is a solar panel? Well, it's a terrific idea because it provides the car shade, but it also provides clean energy. And what agrovoltaic says is, let's put a bunch of solar panels strategically above agriculture fields. And that does two things. One, it's like the perfect place to put solar panels, this big empty lot. And second of all, it provides the agriculture some shade so that when farmers irrigate it, the water isn't evaporating as quickly, right? And so farmers are therefore using less water because agriculture is the biggest by far water user in the state of Arizona. So that's an innovative solution that Democrats are putting on the table to increase clean energy, to use less water, while also making our economy more productive. So those are the kinds of investments we're fighting for when it comes to water.
Yes, great synopsis. The only thing I'll add to that is that Democrats fought really hard to ensure that at least 300 million of the money that was allocated to WIFA go specifically towards conservation efforts. So ideas like the ones that Representative de Los Santos would go straight into conservation efforts that Democrats fought hard for. The majority is interested in something called augmentation, which essentially means taking salt water and cleaning it and making it into drinking water. But in order to do that, you would have to transport it from the Sea of Cortez, which then gets into other federal binational issues. And so that has to go into the equation. We would love to answer more questions or hear about those ideas that are important to you.
So I'm going to take a point of privilege here. I know last night, this is a question that came up, I think, for, revisiting tonight with the folks here. As we know, with our community in LD11, we have a lot of environmental issues. I know, I don't want to, I guess, take too much away from some of the great information that Representative de Los Santos shared with us all. I won't get to too many details, but I know we've got a lot of issues when it comes to our environment, because this has been traditionally lower income community. We've been feeling the effects for decades when it comes to pollution and that impact on our community. Could you guys share some of the thoughts and the things that you guys are doing in the legislature to try and address those issues?
Sure. I'll get us started with something that we sponsored last year and we're going to continue to sponsor. And that's to make our streets and our air cleaner. One of the things that we've sponsored since last year and this year again was to convert all school buses into electric school buses. There are some federal dollars that we could take advantage of, and we have been fighting for those. Those bills are not getting a lot of noise. But again, this is another reminder for all of us in terms of the importance of being able to talk to our friends and neighbors about flipping both the House and the Senate to a Democrat majority so that these ideas can take a little bit more energy.
Yeah, environmental justice is something that is extraordinarily important to me. And I want to back up and sort of explain why. And that is that in where you live, the air you breathe determines how long you live. It determines your health. And for too long, we've known that this country has placed toxic industries polluting industries and low-income communities like ours, and communities of color like ours. One of the most horrific maps I have ever seen in my life is a map of life expectancy in Phoenix. And if you look at the map, it breaks it down by zip code. How long a child, when they're born, how long is that child expected to live? And it breaks it down by zip code. And if you look at the zip codes in South Phoenix and you compare them to the zip codes in Scottsdale, you will see that people in South Phoenix are expected to live 15 fewer years. 15 years that grandchildren don't have with their grandparents. 15 years that our communities, that our people are being frankly robbed of. That is horrifying, and that is directly a result of our laws and public policy, period. And so I've introduced two pieces of legislation this session. One of them is a constitutional amendment that would say that every human being in the state of Arizona, regardless of our race, our zip code, or how much money we make, has a right to clean air and clean water and a clean environment. Because having those things isn't something that should be reserved for wealthy people, right? Clean air and clean water are a human right that is owed to every single one of us by virtue of being human beings. And so that's what that constitutional amendment would do. The second one basically says, if the community you're trying to build a new toxic plant in, or a new waste dump in that has a lot of pollution or that would pollute the air, you cannot build it in a community where the average income is below a certain threshold, because we are sick and tired of the state and the government putting these awful industries in places where our children have to breathe them, in places where our grandparents have to breathe them. And you're seeing, along with lower life expectancy rates, much higher rates of asthma and respiratory and cardiac diseases. And you're also even seeing a heartbreaking spike in miscarriages, where pregnant women are losing children, are losing their babies because of the toxic chemicals that are in the air. And that's not something you see in wealthier areas. So this is quite literally an issue of life and death, an issue of human health. And so it is one thing that I'm really fighting for. In terms of the budget, there are a couple of items that are glimmers of hope here. The governor has included, for example, I believe it is $5 million to clean up what are called PFAs. You may know them as forever chemicals. These are basically chemicals that are not only toxic, but very toxic and extremely hard to scrub out using existing technology. So the governor is hoping to appropriate $5 million to upgrade and increase our water cleaning system so we can take PFAs out of our water. I will be strongly supporting that proposal. Senator Mitzi Epstein from in the Senate has introduced a terrific bill along with CHISPA, which is an environmental, Latino-focused environmental justice organization, to give $400,000 to plant more trees in low-income schools. $400,000 out of a $16 billion budget is a drop in the bucket, and I hope we can get that in there to make sure that our students have more shade in their schools, that these trees are cleaning up the air a little bit in those schools. And there's even innovative plans to sort of teach students and kids a little bit about gardening and trees and that sort of thing through these funds. So I'm hopeful that there are glimmers of hope here that are beginning to shine through when it comes to environmental justice, and we fully intend to support those proposals.
One of the things that we will do is we'll include our email addresses so that as you receive all of this information, if there's anything that comes to mind as you continue to go forward, not just in terms of the budget, but how it works and what we're doing with legislation. We would both love to hear from you and welcome those questions. And if you ever want to stop by, just like we said to Erica, please know that those offices don't belong to us, they belong to you. So if you ever want to go down to the Capitol and bring your children, your grandchildren, please know that those invitations are always open so that we can begin to cultivate the next generation. Carmen.
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask Patrick there, all of this information that's being put on the chat, is it possible if you could put it in the newsletter so I could keep up with that? I think it'd be much easier for me.
Yeah, so we're what we're doing, we're recording this one, so we're going to include tonight's session and the previous night's session in our upcoming newsletter. We're also going to add it to our YouTube channel as well. So folks who weren't able to make it, they can, of course, watch the conversation. Regarding a lot of the questions in the chat, what we'll do is we'll see if we can put together something where if people want to see some of the specific questions, we'll see how we can include that as well. We'll maybe link it to a document or something of that nature. That's a really good question. Appreciate that. So, like I said, we're kind of at the top of the hour here. I want to thank both of our representatives for taking some time out to meet with us and do this session. Like I said, this is how democracy works. This is what democracy looks like, is being able to sit down with your representatives to, ask them, hey, what are you doing to represent us? But on the flip side is also, what can we do as members of the community to, help these situations? So, like I said, we're going to have this conversation available for folks who weren't able to make it, but definitely tell your friends, tell your family, have them watch it, have these conversations in your circles, because the more that we're talking about these important issues, the more we can move the needle forward on these issues. I would be remiss if I didn't do one final plug for LD11 Democrats. Like I said, we are your local Democratic Party here. And like I said, we're really wanting to make sure that we are sharing information about what's going on in our government, what's going on in our community. And of course, having events like these where you can get time to talk with our elected representatives. We meet every month. It's the second Wednesday of each month. We're actually having a meeting that's going to be happening tomorrow evening, and will be an in-person meeting. It'll be a good one as well. So those of you who got, of course, the invite for this event, you're now on our mailing list. So we'll definitely keep you in the loop of future meetings, events, things of a community interest that we'd love to have you guys be involved with. Again, we want to thank you all for coming out tonight virtually, and we hope to see you at our next event really, really soon. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, LD11.
Lovely being, good night.
Good night.